History Inside a Nutshell, the show where we sail into our port of call discussing maritime history. In honour of the anniversary of the launching of the RMS Olympic, it's about time a video was made on the Slipways. Now, in a very personal experience, I saw the Slipways back when I was visiting the Titanic Belfast in April 2023, and I have to say though, it was a brilliant but an emotional experience. And until then, we will jump straight into the video. The Slipways of the Olympic, Titanic and Britannic. Behind the Titanic Belfast Museum there is a historic site that is open to the public. However, this isn't an ordinary site. This site once had two slipways that built three infamous White Star liners: the Olympic, the Titanic and the Britannic. Although there aren't any existing remains on Slipway 1, where the SS Nomadic and the SS Traffic were built, there are a few remains of Slipways 2 and 3 left, and historians and Titanic enthusiasts recognise the site, and for some they have visited there as a place of pilgrimage. But what is the story of the Slipways? Like the first slipway, Slipways 2 and 3 were built at the North Yard on the waters of the Victoria Channel in Belfast Lough. The gantries would be built at a distance of 0.2 miles from the Harland and Wolff shipping offices, which is now the Titanic Hotel. Around the time of their construction, the White Star Line went to Harland and Wolff to request two slipways in preparation for the construction of two new liners. Between 1904 and 1907, White Star were up against competition as their rivalry company, the Cunard Line, had launched two new liners, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. Cunard's new liners had become a corporate threat, and White Star knew they had to fight back. This pair was built to replace four original slipways that were used for past White Star vessels. The new slipways were completed in 1908, and after that, workmen built a new gantry where it would house electric cranes. On the 16th of December 1908, the keel of the Olympic was laid on slipway number 2. On the 22nd of March 1909, the keel of the RMS Titanic was laid on slipway number 3. Going off topic, and before everyone starts a debate about the dates, there will be a future video covering on the dates of laying the Titanic's keel. Anyway, let's get back on topic. At the lengths of 882 feet and 9 inches long, the Olympic and the Titanic would be built by 3,000 or 4,000 workers who would work on shifts lasting 11.5 hours and only have a half-an-hour lunch break. However, the conditions were unsafe by today's standards, and during the construction of both ships, there would have been recordings of accidents, with some of them resulting in death. In October 1910, the RMS Olympic was launched from slipway number 2, and she entered the water in the Victoria Channel. In May 1911, the Titanic was launched from slipway number 3. In this animation by Jack Gibson and featured on the channel Titanic Honour and Glory, we can see the Titanic gracefully sliding down the slipway before entering the River Lagan. It took around 62 seconds for her to leave the slipway and go into the water. On the 30th of November 1911, and returning on slipway number 2, workmen began building on the third Olympic-class liner, the RMS Britannic. Although she had been planned by White Star, the company wanted to see how well the Olympic was received before officially completing to order for the Britannic. By the 12th of March 1912, the Britannic's keel was framed to the height of the double bottom, and the ship had already incorporated into her earlier design plans. When the Titanic sank in April, and while the Enquires were taking place, workers at Harlenden Wharf continued to work on the Britannic. However, in response to the disaster, the White Star Line decided to make several changes to the Britannic. The main change was to increase the ship's beam to allow for a double hull and raise 6 out of the 15 watertight bulkheads up to B deck. Other changes include adding large crane-like davits powered by an electric motor and adding additional lifeboats. The Britannic was launched in February 1914, but while she was being fitted out, the third-class liner was requisitioned into a hospital ship following the outbreak of the First World War. She would sink while in service in November 1916. After building more ships on the slipways, the gantry was torn down in the 1960s. In the following years, the slipways were used as a car park, but by 2011, a property construction and management company named Harcourt Developments bought the land where the slipways were. In 2005, the company announced plans to build a museum dedicated to the Titanic to open to the public by 2012 on the centenary of the ship's maiden voyage and sinking. This would later become the Titanic Belfast Museum. During the construction of the museum, an idea had been put forward to reconstruct the Arrol gantry on the joint slipways. However, this would never happen. Another plan was to design a memorial garden on the Olympic and Britannic's joint slipway. This was approved. The slipways were landscaped and were opened to the public in March 2012. While the Olympic and Titanic slipways get attention from the public, and despite sharing the same slipway as the Olympic, Britannic never gets a mention. There are no surviving remains apart from the 2 concrete ramps at the landward end of the slipways and the railway tracks embedded into the concrete base. The museum decided to include lampposts to represent the towers of the original gantry and illuminated outlines in the shape of the hulls of the Olympic, the Titanic and the Britannic. Today, visitors or dog walkers get the opportunity to walk on the slipways as an open public space. On the Olympic slipway, there is a memorial garden with grassed and paved areas. The areas and the measurements of them represent the numbers of survivors and victims that were on board the Titanic. The measurement of this area is nearly 17,670 feet and nearly 5,400 metres long. On the Titanic slipway, there is a life-size plan of what was her promenade deck, funnels and lifeboats, which are inlaid in white stone. There are also benches to sit on. Some of them represent a few of the vessel's lifeboats. There are also 10 glass panels which lay in different parts. 2 include where the second funnel would have been, and another in front of the museum at the nose of the Titanic's bow. Each panel is etched with the names of those who died during the construction and launch of the ship, as well as the sinking. On certain occasions, the slipways become a car park for visitors who are attending special events like weddings and conventions. But every year on the 14th of April, the museum holds a church service where people hold candles and remember the people who died during the disaster. This service starts at the time when the ship struck the iceberg, 11:40 p.m. So why are the slipways important to history? That's a question people can debate about, but the likely answer is that because of Belfast's connection with Titanic. Residents and visitors in Belfast remember the Titanic as part of their city history, and mostly those who live or work in the city ask visitors questions like, "Have you watched the James Cameron movie?" or "What is your interest in Titanic?" We can only guess what the answers would be. The slipways are a high recommendation for those who are either visiting the Titanic Belfast Museum or walking around the city. If you haven't been, now's the time to do it and sit down on the benches to reflect on a part of maritime history. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe for future videos. Until next time, this has been History Inside a Nutshell, departing from the dogs. Thank you so much for all of your support and enjoy the rest of your voyage.